Okay, we're back, sort of. We left off on me wanting to talk about the more theoretical aspects of research. Okay, this wasn't originally a thing that I planned to talk about. Like,
Actually, this was, and then it wasn't, and then it is again.
no. It's more of I didn't want to extend it this far, but after talking with Kevin kasi, or rather kasi, me and Kevin have this Kevin is very left.
Let's introduce Kevin to the audience.
Yeah. So Kevin Cordovis nga ba?
Yeah.
Okay. Kevin Cordovis is a mutual friend of ours. He's a meteorologist who also happens to be one of the more hard left members of the College of Science in UP Diliman. Now, I feel a bit worried that I just red tagged him like that, but technically I'm also on the same alignment. But in essence, so me and Kevin like shitting on libertarians. If any libertarians happen to chance upon this recording, fuck you guys. So, and one thing that concerned me was one of his former students reacted to a statement of Kevin saying that science should serve the people. The student went quote, I think serve the people is a fairly dangerous statement to make, unquote, which Kevin replied to really strongly, and I felt was very misinformed. It's very misguided
And reductive.
Yeah, it's very misguided. It's very reductive, and the guy used theoretical physics as an argument of why serve the people was such a dangerous thing, because then it would limit the scope of theoretical physics. But this part of the talk is more towards why I think theoretical physics is still technically, or rather theory in general, it still technically serves both the purposes of science and the purposes of helping the people advance. I started this out as stating that why toy models matter, but let's be a bit more general. Why does theory matter in the first part? In the most part. So here's one thing that I'd like to ask Hez muna. Anong foundations niyo for actually doing environmental science? What's the foundations of environmental science?
It is the synthesis of all current knowledge with regards to how the environment works, and this
Yes.
includes.
So
That's why our core subjects are things like we need to synthesize how the atmosphere works. We need to synthesize how geology. We need to synthesize the hydrology. We need to synthesize how the water bodies work, how water is circulated across the earth, how and how the non-living parts of the earth interact with the living parts of the earth, as well as how all of those interact. So that's the ecology part. That's only the ecology
That's
part.
only the ecology.
And the one thing that separates the environmental science from just the sum of its individual parts is the fact that we actually have to look at it from almost human geographical standpoint, in the sense that we need to examine the relationship of humans with their environment, which is a pretty big concept of human geography. And environmental science is basically what happens if you take just the physical science and then apply it over what humans have been doing to their environment. What is the relationship between humans and the earth?
Essentially, what you're looking at is that you are looking at the environmental variables, and if you add humans into the mix, it's now an ecological system.
It is now an ecological system. It is now very much a system where what we do changes things.
Now, here's a question. When you first develop those ecological models, what do they look like?
At first,
Yeah, at first. The very first thing that they teach you.
the very first thing was, well, first of all, they thought they taught us that at some point we thought that the Earth was alive.
Oh, okay.
So the Gaia hypothesis.
Yeah.
Our relationship with the Earth had changed from us having an innate, deep understanding that we are part of it as organisms, to we thinking of the Earth as a resource, and then how we need to basically strike a balance between these two for if we want to develop as a species or something to that effect.
Now, is that a simple model though?
No, not at
No.
all. Not at all.
What is the simplest ecological model that was taught?
The ecological succession, I guess. Yung,
What does it entail?
it entails that as an ecosystem develops, it goes through predictable stages of development.
So that's your...
That is
What-
the most basic.
Yeah, in physics, that's what we call the first order approximation of any sort of model. Now, from an environmental science standpoint, how accurate is it?
Not very.
Not very. But what does it successfully model?
It generally gives you a very rough outline of how an ecosystem develops from scratch.
What's the next step to improving that model?
Actually, modeling each of the individual components, and then we have to incorporate how each of these individual layers is. It depends on what kind of ecosystem it is. For example, the classic model is usually rainforest, and what does things like, okay, something changed. It is these kinds of trees are here. These kinds of animals and scavengers are here. This is what the microorganisms in this area
Do.
do.
Or rather, what? These are the populations of...
These are the populations of
the certain
of certain
microorganisms. And then this is what they do.
This is what they do.
This is their role, sort of.
And then we go to things that are unpredictable, like fire. Fire is used as a common example of this because whenever forest fires occur, and forest fires actually do occur naturally.
Yeah, they do.
And whenever it happens, if we only go by the first order approximation of the whole succession thing,
Yeah. The whole
It
succession
should.
model.
fires should regress the growth of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
But in
sometimes it
reality,
enhances.
It enhances the growth of the ecosystem. So that these are factors that need to be taken into account if you want the next order.
In the next order. And then as you progress to finer and finer orders, what do you get? What do we get? What aspects do we model? End up modeling? Like just a few examples.
The thing kasi is that we cannot go down to the species level masyado because
Yeah.
niches.
Yeah, like not even species, just
Niches na lang talaga eh. Niches ang
niches.
at least the most granular unit of ecology that you
Yeah.
can go down towards. And even then, the environment, while it should make these organisms behave in a predictable manner, it doesn't. So there's always a degree of randomness to everything.
So when you start summing up, okay, so we went from a very general model, and then we tried to fine grain it. And then from that fine grain, if we try to sum up all the fine grains, what do we get? Or at least a certain section of the fine grains.
We get a working model.
Yeah, so like what are those working models that we can get? Because obviously, already saying from a scientific standpoint, once you get to those fine grains and then you start summing them up, they don't really all connect that well.
In fact, it actually gets more confusing.
It gets more confusing, but you can connect certain aspects of it to make sense of one branch of like let's say the certain aspects of the ecology.
So let's start using a different example from this point.
Yeah.
Let's look at atmosphere models.
Yeah, atmosphere models.
Since the general way that air cycles around the Earth
Yeah.
is very well known by now.
Yeah.
At least if you're a meteorologist.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is there is a little thing called sea, air, land interaction.
Yeah.
And those three being what they are, and since the Earth is not homogeneous at all,
Yeah.
it makes for a very confusing surface level or higher order approximation of things.
Because like you have to take into account all of the boundary conditions and how those boundary conditions affect the interior bulk of, well, in this case, the atmosphere when interacting with land over land masses versus over bodies of water versus, well, the atmosphere.
So the common thing between both of these is, if we're looking at, for example, the ecology versus, not really versus, ecology, and we also look at
Parallel to that,
the atmosphere, we notice a pattern. You have a vague broad strokes, and then once you start zooming in, it gets more clear as to what's going on. But if you zoom in very closely, when all the details start not adding up very well, this is where the confusion, or rather, this is where most of the bulk of the theory needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
It is here in the zone where we're supposed to know about how this works. And yet when we are faced with the very minute details of what's actually going on with the observed phenomena, that is where things don't add up.
Okay. So, nonetheless, if you take all of those things together, try to conglomerate them, try to make sense of them, what do you get in the end? Diba? As you said, you get a working model. What does that working model give you then?
It gives us a relatively useful approximation of what's going on in the real world.
Yes, exactly. And this is the point that I'd like to make. Theory is not just toying around. Like, let me connect it back to the point that I want to make. I wanted you to make that point to actually ground things that theory crafting does not just happen in physics, nor is it just a purely mathematical thing.
It happens in any physical science.
It happens in any physical science. In fact, it happens in any science, period. Theoreticians develop the models. That is a fact. And the reason why toy models matter is because you always have to start from the first order approximation. There's a reason for that. Halimbawa, back to your case. What would be easier, to start from the succession model and then building it up from there, or to try and formulate a model completely based off what's already happening in the real world, like with all the minute details and such?
It would be possible.
It would be possible, yes, but
the usefulness is very limited to just that specific minutiae.
Yeah.
For example, if you're starting small,
if you develop the models, like
layers, like the layers of the tree cover.
Yeah.
And each one is already its own ecosystem by itself. And you could start from the small details, but what you'll end up with is a model that can only reliably simulate only that specific portion of what's going on.
Yeah. And then if you try to extend that beyond, you'll realize that
it gets very useless very easily outside of its intended purpose.
Unless you manage to be able to connect the regimes. But even then, for you to make that proper connection, you're going to need a broader framework. In physics, what we're most used to is that we look at the physical phenomenon and ask, okay, how does it move? That's actually one of our first questions. How does it move?
How does it move?
Yeah.
But to be fair, that is basically what the core of physics is.
Like the most fundamental physics, at least for me, is classical mechanics.
Everything has to start from that.
Everything has to start when you ask, how does it move?
Because every single anything in the measurable universe moves.
Yes.
Constantly.
Yes, it moves to a certain extent relative to another thing.
So therefore movement is happening all the time to anything.
Yeah. Like you can never like there's no absolute reference frame where you say that thing is stationary, because that thing's only stationary relative to you, but relative to something else, it most likely is moving. So classical mechanics is essentially like the first order approximation of things, because let x be the position. If x equals x naught, that tells you the current position of your particle. Maybe its initial position, in fact. But if it's actually moving, then you'll have to add another approximation. X equals x naught plus vt. The approximation then would be vt
which is velocity.
times time. Because then, okay, I am saying that that is moving linearly with respect to me. So now, the first order approximation is that thing is moving. That thing is likely moving, but it's hard to it's actually hard to explain from my sense. Pero if you want to measure the position of a particle with respect to time, you start with knowing its initial position, and then knowing its velocity with respect to you, times time linearly with time. Now, if it were accelerating, then you will add another term, 1/2 at squared. That tells you if the particle is accelerating. If somehow you need more terms, then you can actually add more terms to it. T cubed, t to the fourth, etc. This is what we mean by generating a model. You start with the most basic assumptions, the most basic assumptions. You try to pattern it with the current observational data. You look at your data, you look at the model, look at it and say, okay, my model and my data look very different. Why? What? There's nothing wrong with your data. That you'll have to make terms with that. Like if you did the proper statistical tests, you will never say that my data is wrong. My model is correct. In fact, saying that my model is correct is probably the most foolish and rookie move you can do as a theoretician. You will never assert that your model is correct. You'll always have to think, is there something wrong with my model? What can I improve with my model? And that's the core point of theory. People don't just do dark energy models, modified gravity models, string theory. Okay, some people do it for the sake of the fun. Obviously, it's sometimes fun. Some people really have a kick for that. But more importantly, they do it because there is a physical phenomenon that we haven't successfully modeled. And because we haven't successfully modeled it, we'll try to model it. If our models are insufficient, then we'll try to look for ways to fix those models, which results in further models, usually further mathematical tools or further refinements in some mathematical structures. So that's when you get into things like M theory, Kaluza-Klein theory, etc. Like those abstract mathematics will not make sense to a applied scientist unless you know the context of why those theories were developed in the first place. Some of them were developed purely from mathematical standpoint, which is in itself a good thing. But from a physics standpoint, theoreticians develop those mathematical tools in order to develop better models. So as a result, those better models will then be able to better fit our observational data, and that observational data fit will then allow us to improve our models even better. The scientific process is usually outlined as paano nga ba? You have an observation, and then, no. Usually, anong tinuturo sa school?
School, we need...
You look at an observation. You make a hypothesis out of that observation. You say that, if I do this to this, if I do X to environment Y, or if I change X to environment Y, I get Z. Then you test that hypothesis either with experiments or additional observation. And then you go back to the model and check, or rather the hypothesis, and check if it fits with your expectations. If it does, then good. You can try to extend it. If it doesn't, then good. You need to modify your model. But what's usually understated is that in a scientific process, you only have two nodes. First is the hypothesis making, then is three. Hypothesis, observation slash experiment, results and analysis, then going back to hypothesis. Thing is, within the hypothesis making itself, or rather the theory crafting, there are several cycles that you need to take into account. First off, can I modify my theory sufficiently using just the observational variables that I got? If yes, do so. If no, then you'll have to exit the cycle a bit. You'll now have to check, is the mathematics of my model, or rather, are the assumptions of my model, either the mathematics or the assumptions, do they fit, or rather, are they sufficient in modeling the phenomenon that I want to see? If they aren't, then you'll have to go into the deep theory, which is basically crafting the mathematical tools that will allow you, once you've gone out of that rabbit hole, to craft the new model, the new theory. So, why am I saying all of this actually? Thing is, the guy made a statement as if theoretical physics serves itself to its own end.
The ideal science is science
Yeah,
to serve its own ends.
Yeah. When in reality, you cannot divorce the theory crafting from the scientific process that actually generates results. Like, I'll give another somewhat more concrete example. Let's go away from the very deep theory, the mathematical construction, and into something that's a bit more recent. Gravitational wave astronomy. Now, it is a fact, it is well known among physicists nowadays that it took 100 years for Einstein's prediction of gravitational waves to be confirmed by the observations of LIGO and Virgo. Now, a lot of people be like, wow, gravitational waves, yes. So, why are we studying gravitational waves? Well, for the most part, we study gravitational waves to better understand the physics of gravity. Basically, we use it to build knowledge. Kevin would argue that that in itself is already a service to humanity. Like, it's already a service to the people, just adding more knowledge to the general pool of knowledge of the people. But I would go a step further. Or rather, I would go a step sideways to that. What's often understated in developing technologies to verify very high-level theories in physics, such as gravitational wave observations, dark matter observations, etc., is that not only does it require a lot of theory and a lot of physics behind it, but it also requires a lot of engineering and a lot of interdisciplinary fields in order to make things work. So, what has come out of the LIGO and Virgo projects as people were designing interferometers to be able to detect gravitational waves? I practically already said the answer. We actually developed interferometers that can detect gravitational waves. So these are instruments that have sensitivities that are below seismic vibrations.
How many orders of magnitude are we talking about?
10 to the negative 15?
10 to the... So, seismic waves times 10 raised to the negative 15, ganong...
No, not really. More like at least 5 orders of magnitudes less than seismic vibrations.
That's still 5 zeros apart.
Yeah. Some people might think, why did we develop these instruments? Thing is, what else do we use interferometers for? You have no idea?
Yeah.
Well, okay. We use interferometers for a lot of things, usually lasers, etc. But thing is, interferometers are really useful measurement instruments in general, not just for gravitational wave experiments. All the technology that comes into developing that interferometer also includes stuff like seismic buffers, noise cancellation instruments. All of the instruments developed into making the technology to make that instrument possible can be used in other fields, some of which might not even be related to gravitational wave astronomy. In fact, a ton of new technologies spring from technologies usually meant just for observing high physics, or rather advanced physics. So, to say that the pursuit of theoretical physics is divorced from the needs of the people, or rather should be divorced from the needs of the people, is fundamentally flawed just because of the fact that most people, or rather, most technologies, a good number of modern technologies, in fact, sprung from the pursuit of verifying theories in physics. That's a point that I'd want to make. It's that, okay, you could preach that theoretical physics is, or rather, theoretical sciences is theory for its own sake. It's science for its own sake. But to say that it truly is, that is to ignore the contributions of observational, of instrumentation that allows us to verify those theories in the first place. Theorists put forth these theories in order to better understand nature. The experimentalists keep up in order to check if those theories are correct or not. And in doing so, theorists inevitably pull the frontier as to what technologies are possible. So that's a point I'd like to make, that theory for its own sake is good and all, but you have to remember that in the greater context of things, theories are tools used in science to be able to better understand the universe. And in doing so, it's like the software of science. If you develop good software, and if you develop it well enough, eventually you will need the hardware in order to run it.
In which this is
Yeah.
the applied sciences.
Yeah, and this is the applied sciences. So overall, it's something that's really close to me because I'm a astrophysicist who craves for having access to data, simply because the physics that I do is more of, I do this kind of model, or rather I develop this kind of model, and then I want to see what data should I be able to know given this model. Given this model, what should I be able to know? What would I not be able to know with this data? And well, this is a bit more of a practicality issue na. But I also develop models such that they're observable at least in the next 10 years. That's why I also keep up with stuff like Euclid and other large sky surveys in order to know, okay, what do these guys want to see in the sky? And how will I model the statistics, the correlations that should be observed given a particular cosmological or a gravitational model?
One thing I'd like to actually add to this is, from earlier what you said, there's also, well, at least parang ganun yung dating sa akin, but there seems to be this misguided idea that the idea of science for its own sake is something that is actually meant to be aspired to. And this is something,
It's too hedonistic for me, at least.
or at least, what is with the line of thinking that most of these thought pieces say that anything, like even science, should be free of that kind of influence.
Well, that's more leaning into the libertarian ideology na eh. Pero I personally think that science, theory even, just as with anything, you can't divorce it from context. Like sure, you can temporarily divorce it from context. Sort of a toy model within a toy model for the toy models. But eventually, someone's going to ask you, so anong point ng research mo? And then you'll have to ask, and then you'll have to answer. If you don't, like, even within your own community, some people will ask, so what's the point of you developing your model? How does it relate to current models?
And even then, okay, so let me
And
bring
then how
up an
does it,
example.
and then how does it relate to current observations?
So let me bring up an example actually. This is something that is recent actually. And I think I want to bring this up because this is exactly the reaction actually people expect when it comes to things like this.
Yeah.
At some point, an NIP graduate actually published a paper in the journal Nature.
Who?
Thor.
Thor. Yeah.
About an experiment that
I know that experiment, yeah.
that successfully managed to make light behave or at least move at a speed that is slower than the speed of light
the speed of light in vacuum.
in a vacuum.
That was huge.
And a lot of reactions to this were met, even with whenever I'm discussing this with members of, not really members, when I'm discussing this with even people who already have scientific backgrounds, they would tend to react in some form of, okay, I mean, you guys at physics did that. So, what does this mean? Why do you want to do this to light? What is it useful for? And if you were looking at the lens of that person who suggested that science should be for itself,
Yeah.
then this would be a monumental achievement because you just made one of the most constant, if not the constant, in all of the universe behave like it's the way it's not supposed to. That would be almost like bragging rights from just that alone.
That's true.
And yet, the first thing that people ask is still, what do you want to use it for? And that's actually a pretty enlightening point that I wanted to make.
Since yes, it is true that it's a really good achievement. But if you actually know the physics behind it, since well, I'm no stranger to what they're doing, sina Sir Nat Hermosa. I'm no stranger to what they're doing since what they do is they add angular momentum to light beams.
Angular momentum.
They're essentially twisting light. And what that does is, if you know how conservation of momentum works, like general momentum, not just linear, not just angular, where is that momentum going as you twist it? It's going to angular momentum. So technically, if you look at the angular and the linear momenta of that light beam, turns out that there's nothing really violated in the lab frame. It's just that the momentum was transferred to somewhere else.
It's where like, we only perceive that the speed is slower because
Its linear momentum seems to have decreased.
but what actually happened is that
It just has angular momentum on it. So that's where it went. Nat Hermosa and Sor are really good experimentalists, and I highly respect them for that. And there is already application for what they did. It is extremely useful in optical communications. The fact that you can control the speed of light, at least to a certain extent, by just adding angular momentum to your light beams.
that seems to maybe affect things like fiber optics.
Yes, it's extremely important in fiber optic communications. And even then, that's a breakthrough, but it's still going to take a few years maybe several, just to properly use it in any context.
I mean, for one, it needs to be replicated first.
Yeah, it needs to be replicated first. And once you replicate that, then you need to know, okay, if we tweak light to this speed, what can we do with it? So what they did for a budding physicist looks like this is peak experimental physics, but really, this is just the start of it. Nat's team just wrote the equations on paper, played around with their lasers, using several different prisms in order to generate the proper angular momentum in their beams, and then they saw what happens. They checked if their theory manages to line up with the experiment, and then it just lines up. The next step is, what can you do with it? And that's something that you really need to see if you're doing science. It's also a point that I'd like to make back to yung what's the purpose of research? Dr. Lantican's research on corn was in 1961. Nobody saw the significance of that really until the 1970s. It took a long time. I foresee that the slowing down of light experiment done by Dr. Hermosa and Thor might travel down the same path. It's fairly significant, but you still need to do further research in order to see where it actually goes. Granted, they have an easier time because they are in applied science. You saw the tangible effects firsthand. Oh, and by the way, how will you measure the speed of light at that case? Well, you have to use an interferometer. So we go back to the case of the interferometers, and obviously you'd want sensitive interferometers for that, because the speed of light doesn't really change that much, even if you add angular momentum. So
I mean, it's more of a proof of concept.
Yes, it's a proof of concept, and you're going to need good interferometers in order to do that. And then how do you develop good interferometers? Well, obviously you could just do it for the sake of developing better interferometers, but when you have something like a really huge theoretical physics project involving cosmology like LIGO, it becomes a necessity for the project to develop good interferometers. Then you do technology transfer of those interferometers, of those seismic buffers, to fields that might actually need them on a widespread basis. So yeah, theory is important, but not just for the sake of theory. It's a service in itself. It's a service to science, and no matter how indirect, it's also a service to the general public. So ano use ng research? Ang daming uses ng research. Not just the applied researches, because those are easy to find, no matter how people find it slow to do. Mas mabagal ang ginagawa naming mga theoreticians. Like the Nobel takes at least 2 decades before you get recognized. And we have it, and the Nobel hasn't even recognized that much women or people of color.
As you said, it's almost as if they're 2 decades behind.
Yeah. I mean, this year's physics Nobel went to James Peebles, which is really significant in the field of cosmology. But then it's always a pet peeve, especially of female scientists, how it's actually a pet peeve of mine as well, because Vera Rubin was the physicist who published on dark matter, and yet she was never credited for it. She never won a Nobel for it, which is something that I find sad. I almost always cite her when I write stuff regarding dark matter. No, not almost always. I always cite her in regards to writing stuff on dark matter, simply because of how important her contributions are to dark matter theory, to the development of dark matter. And then you have the guys on exoplanets, which are actually really, well, according to Perry at least, mabilis na yun 20 years. 1995 yung first
Discovery of the exoplanet.
Yeah.
And even then, I think what got them the Nobel was their work on the motion of exoplanets.
Yes. or rather the identification of an exoplanet through the changes of emotion in its star.
In the star, okay.
It's a very indirect observation. Since then, we've gotten better. Theory is important, basically. So, I think I've gotten that out of my chest. It's mostly a rant from me. Now, let's get into something a bit more different.
And more close to home for most.
More close to home for most scientists in general.
Not just here, but
Not just here, but everywhere.
Everywhere.
Kasi yan eh. I personally would not have much issues with this. Like, okay, sure. I do enter phases of madness where I think of nothing but doing research. But the general environment of the NIP is very friendly with regards to like, okay, fine. We do have cases of people who don't like other people in the NIP. That's a given. But advisors in general, like our advisors at least, our professors, won't take it against you if you have a mental breakdown and you need a break. They might not be able to relate to it, but they will certainly not pressure you out of it. Like they get that, okay, you need a mental health break, or you need to at least loosen up a bit, think about things, etc. Maybe you need a new advisor, for example. Whatever suits your boat. And that's, I think, a really lucky thing that we have in the NIP. Like we're not an environment conducive for mental health, but at least we're not gonna make it any harder for our students.
so maybe let's start putting in context as to why we're talking about this.
Yeah. We have a friend.
Well, let's start a little bit earlier than that. Something happened to CS, or at least from my perspective as a grad student when I was still taking my master's.
Yeah.
At first, it was fine. And the environment was more, okay, I could still focus on being a student. I mean, it turned out to be a screen. Because the first 2 years of grad school, it wasn't plagued with more than just the expectation of being a student. I could literally just focus on my coursework. And then I could worry about things like what thesis topic should I take? Should I get my topic approved? I have to wait for the graduate seminar to happen for us to actually get feedback on our topics, get assigned an advisor for your thesis. But sometime around the time I started actually doing my MS thesis, something had changed, or at least something was beginning to change in the environment of where I was. And that is, for every passing new batch, it had seemed that the expectations for these students were growing ever so higher. It kind of started around the time where I graduated, and then I actually started working in the research group in our institute. And then I noticed a pattern happening. The new students were now expected to do work in the research group even before they were supposed to do their thesis work.
Like by entry.
By entry. And then even later, we start hearing things like certain subjects are now required for entry that they didn't used to be. Some of those changes were needed, admittedly, but others felt less needed now, and more.
We want to fast track things.
We want to fast track things, and by itself, had that been the only thing that they changed, I would have been fine with it, because the institute wants to fast track the MS thesis. That's fine. You want people to finish their thesis faster. You want people to actually get feedback on their thesis. You want the students to actually publish their outputs. That's fine. That's fine. But what changed was the environment. And then I start finding out that everyone who was being considered for the program, at least, everyone who actually got in, was now being made to do research work for the research groups, for the various labs, while they're still students, and they're basically just piling up work after work for these students who are still somehow expected to do everything in that.
Essentially, sometimes they're treated like free RAs.
They are essentially treated as if they were free labor. And that's where I start having objections. Around this time, I actually also start reading articles around the Western media sphere that say that this situation isn't new. It's not just us, it's everywhere. Grad schools have this tendency of using students for free labor for their projects, for research projects.
Actually, I have a question. Are you, like, even in grad school, are you guys exposed to the article ba or book on being a scientist?
Not until Kevin, actually.
Not until Kevin?
Not until Kevin.
On being a mentor. There's also a series like that. On being a mentor.
Well, here's the
Do
thing.
you know those things?
No. I was not.
Kasi our grad students are forced to go under those. Both of those, in fact.
In fact, both of those, any of those two books, they are not required. Or rather, no one. I mean, some of the profs do know about this, but they just didn't teach those to their students for some reason.
Sa amin, it's not a teaching thing. It's a reading assignment eh. And then, kailangan gawa ng reaction paper.
Okay. That's a
Although, well, as instructors, like, even if you were a former instructor, you are exempt from doing that. Because, well, you are directly exposed to the environment.
It's more like it should have been a reading assignment. Some profs do assign it as a reading assignment now, but people had to be reminded. That's what I'm saying.
Since for our case, in the case of the NIP, we enforce on being a scientist, or as we like to call it, OBAS, on our students as early as their 4th year undergrad. And then we do it again for grad school.
Maybe there's an expectation that you should
On
have,
being scientist and on being a mentor.
you should have learned this in your undergraduate degree. May ganun kaya?
No. I think the reason why we do it is to normalize the fact that, like, all of the mental health things, all of the things that make sure that the scientists, the students that we train to be scientists, are sane all throughout. Like, on being a scientist and on being a mentor actually has guidelines on those things. And it's been hammered to us to the point that sometimes you question, why do we even read this shit? This is already common sense to us.
And then you find out that there's a place where it isn't.
Yes. And I think this is also why I feel so shocked whenever I hear about the work conditions in ISM. Because in the NIP, it's drilled into us before we graduate and even during grad school that we need to be considerate of both of our professors and our students. Like, we take it for granted because it's drilled into us constantly. But so that's why I had to ask if you guys actually go through OBAS and OBAM. Turns out you don't. Kasi like,
should we be putting this out to the public na that we're stating on record na yun yung nag-experience ko?
That's fine. Kasi, the thing is kasi, the academe, yes, it is more lax than the corporate than the corporate setting most of the time. Kasi the corporate setting is like, okay, you need to get this work done, bam. But I would argue that the academic setting is more mentally draining. So it's not just
It's a different kind of stress.
no. It's menial work of the desk job, compounded with the academic creativity that you need in order to produce good research. And of course, the structure and discipline that you need in order to be able to produce good results. So, if you try and mix very demanding deadlines to that and don't give your students or your researchers a break, that's definitely going to impact the quality of your research, the quality of your data, and the overall health of your staff. Okay. Mag-flex. Magmayabang ako ng onte. Compared to IESM, how many publications do you guys make a year? Combined.
Combined,
Did you guys make,
I'll ask, kasi kailangan ko makita yung...
estimate mo ng 2018 or
2018,
2017
somewhere around 3 to 4 publications.
for the entire institute?
Mabagal, yes.
The NIP produces 20. 20 a year.
I mean, on a good year, 8. On a good year, 8, sabihin natin.
Okay. The NIP produces at least 10 per lab in a year.
May utang pa akong 2 papers sa advisory.
Oh, yun. Now, I would attribute the NIP's good productivity to the fact that we let our students, we let our researchers, we let our PhD students, we let our MS graduates, MS students, just take a fucking break. They don't do research 24/7. We can't. Not even us theorists can. Like our best researcher in gravity, si Reggie Bernardo, most of the time you don't actually see him doing research. At the times you do, he's very focused. At the times he's not, he's either watching Mr. Robot, Black Mirror, probably Shingeki no Kyojin, anything that's on Netflix.
Like, those 3 series... anyway, that's not the point here anyway.
Yeah. He relaxes. He has time to just slack off. And most of the time, you don't actually see him doing research. He just slacks off. But he's really good. He has a really great publication record. So, it's not in the number of hours you put directly into research, but it's in the balance of having time for yourself, having time for your family, having time for your friends, and the fact that you have research that matters. I mean, for me, in my case, I have too much time slacking off compared to my research. So that's another end of the scale of productivity that you should be avoiding, generally as a researcher. But if you strike that good balance, you'll have a very healthy research environment. And I think that's a general problem in a great deal number of institutes. Because if you stress out your students too much, they're gonna have made-deadlock utak nila. And that is a really bad thing. You cannot produce good research unless you have a good brain running around. You cannot have a good brain running around if you don't let it breathe. It's like exercise.
It's like, you can't publish if the paper is continuously stuck in the revision cycle.
Yeah.
And why does it keep getting stuck in the revision cycle? Because we can't get it to good enough standards.
Yeah.
But at some point, the problem is people will ask you to get it done anyway.
Yeah.
Which results in a huge disconnect between the idea that you want this research to be of this quality and then compromise.
You actually have to strike a balance with that.
And
Because-
this is where bad science starts to come in.
Yeah. You have to strike a good balance between getting your research to as perfect as possible and actually putting it out. Because there are 2 consequences to publish or perish. The culture of publish or perish. It's either you get stuck in the revision cycle because you don't think your research is good enough for publication, or you just keep on publishing and publishing shit without regard to the quality of your publication. Tapos you go into predatory journals pa.
Or it's more of there's a culture of publishing segments of your studies.
We call it salami publishing.
It's as if iterative siya. I think that's a thing. And
Yeah, it's called salami publishing.
and that was what was supposed to happen to my thesis.
It depends.
So I only
How long would it be eh?
I only ended up publishing one of the two papers kasi. Hindi ko pa nasusulat yung pangalawa.
But you still have the data.
I should still have data.
Yeah.
One of those papers is yung udang ko.
You get there.
Also, dangerous thing, I think, for me at least, is attaching papers. Well, not really. That shouldn't be a hazard in and of itself eh.
Attaching papers to what?
To grants. So meaning kapag
That's not a hazard in itself.
That's not a hazard in and of itself eh, kasi kung you're under threat of you not get the lab not getting its money if you don't publish. Which shouldn't be a problem in and of itself eh. It's more of ang hirap na nga mag-publish. Tapos ganun pa yung environment. And then you get stressed out and then the lab falls even more into the red because you didn't publish on time.
Yeah, like the lab starts blaming you, for example, sometimes. Well, actually, let's look at the hierarchy of things here. Why does the academe, especially like in your field, in the case of your field, why do you guys get so stressed so much? What's the root cause?
The money does not come on time.
Yes. Why?
Because we
Who'd
didn't-
be at fault? Hindi kayo. Not
And
you guys.
Here's the worst part eh. We're kind of conditioned to think some of it is our fault, but the thing is, we are always working on previous project money.
Yeah.
It's like a cycle. It's like
You guys are just scraping off of what you already had.
it's more of it's like a debt.
That's even worse.
That's worse. It's a debt cycle.
Yeah.
That this project is leading us to debt, and then we're just expected na okay, we'll just get another project to pay the last project's debt off. This results in things like all of our expenses coming out of our own pockets. And for example, some things like my advisor actually having to give us a salary equivalent from her own money
Yeah.
because the money from the project hasn't come in yet.
Yeah, like a thing that I don't think most supervisors are aware of is that they can also be they're also prone to mental health issues. Eh?
I mean, that's what happened to my supervisor.
Yeah, exactly. Like in the NIP, one of our profs is actually on leave. But mostly due to her mother's health. I think huling bantay na, so she went to the US dahil nandun nanay niya. And like in general, she does take leaves, mental health leaves for her own sake, which I think is very important. And I think it's also her move of doing that is also a contributor of why the NIP is a bit more a bit more conscious about mental health than most other institutes. Because, well, for the senior faculty, one of their colleagues manages to admit that nasa-stress siya. So, she's gonna take some time off. At pinapayagan. So, I think it's a good thing for supervisors themselves to admit that at first, okay, ako'y nahirapan, I'm also getting stressed out. Maybe I should find a way to get some support regarding this and maybe cut off some things that don't need to be done. Unfortunately, in the case of like IESM, for example, it's a bit too systemic.
We can't just stop it.
Yeah, you can't just stop it. Otherwise, you'd be cut from funding.
Considering that a lot of us are already in the red,
Yeah.
as it is to begin with, it's a cycle that just keeps on.
It just keeps on giving.
It perpetuates itself.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot. May perpetual na utang.
Yeah.
Palagi na kailangan may sagutin kami na research institute or grant benefactor or project client, because without those, labs won't even run because there is no other direct source of funding.
Would you say that a huge part of the mental health problems experienced by scientists is due to external factors?
In a sense.
In a sense, like if you're is it an occupational hazard at the moment?
Right now, you would say
As in general, at the moment.
an occupational hazard for what specifically?
The fact that the continuous slew of external problems, especially funding, like financial insecurity,
Financial insecurity.
is going to contribute to is a significant contributor to the exacerbation of your to the
exacerbation.
to the exacerbation of your any mental health issues that were already pre-existing.
Okay, so let's break this down then. The root of the mental health issue, at least for me, is always being caught in a state where you are less than competent. You are being made to feel that you are failing, not doing enough in general. And it's the difficulty of reconciling, are these things that in my control or not? And then, because the problem is, even if these things were not
In my control.
in my control,
You would
I would
still-
still have to
Yeah.
take responsibility for
you
them
would,
anyway.
you would still take the brunt of the. You will still take the brunt of it.
So there's a combining. There's a combination of factors involved here. One is that there, at least, I can say this about my own experience, but this is not reflective of most research groups. But we have to take projects all the time.
Yeah.
But the thing is, sometimes these projects...
It's a thing, by the way. It's not just yours. It's a thing.
These are projects that may or may not be to the skill sets that the students in the research group.
Oh, okay. So they're insufficiently trained in a sense.
Everyone, not
Yeah.
just me, has to learn a skill that they have not previously learned before just because the project requires it of them.
Okay.
That's an interesting environment that I have not seen anywhere else.
Well, it's a thing because ISM does not have an undergraduate department.
It's
It's purely graduate.
it's almost a random thing, that an expectation that I should drop everything at any given point
Just to
work on this project. And having
Like-
to learn something from scratch, and then being expected to at least perform well in something that you've never even heard of until
Yeah.
that.
Kaya ngayon, ISM is requiring certain skills eh.
Well, programming will always be a thing. And at least, I think of all the things that they chose to require of their new entrants, I think programming is at least reasonable enough. Well, so that's one factor. The other is the lack of staff, because due to the limitations of how the contract system works, and since there are no URA units, URA items available in most of the time, and some have to be subcontracted, that results in a very influx staff. It's very unstable, so you cannot expect people to be staying. So for the most part, everything is almost ad hoc, in the sense that
There's very little continuity.
there's very little continuity. People kind of inherit projects that existed before,
And this is before, and then they have to learn everything.
and they have to learn everything again because people leave for various reasons, either because they've graduated or they've moved somewhere else.
Yeah.
Parang ako.
No, you technically graduated.
Both.
Both. You had done both.
So not only are we always having to learn new things, we're also having to disregard our own time because whenever the project calls, you have to be there.
Yeah.
The project does not care about your own well-being. Period.
Yeah.
Whatever project it is. And it's more something people get used to more than tolerate.
Yeah.
It's people, even the supervisors actually don't necessarily care for the system. It's just something that they've internalized. It's just the way things are, and that's pretty sad in and of itself actually.
Yeah.
And then comes the aforementioned financial problems because having to work for months at a time without a salary for a job that you're supposed to be paid for. I actually well, let's not discuss this on record.
Yeah.
This part I won't discuss on record.
Okay. Sure. But yeah, it's a compounding mixture of problems, and by like, obviously, people have their own demons to deal with, and then you have demons apart from your own that you also have to deal with, especially in the academe, where the demands can get very heavy, very very heavy. It's almost like it's completely well. If I were to be completely honest, it's completely stark contrast to how me and Perry handle things. Because recently Perry got a project. He was invited by ICTP in order to develop statistical models for biological systems, and he has like two students on him. One is a PhD, kaibigan ko. One is an MS, kaibigan ko rin. Well, mga kaibigan ko yan. Pero, like, that's the only project he has at the moment. In fact, I think it's his first project in a long time. And he's not really stressing about it too much.
Okay, because I realized something that, okay, maybe I can talk about this specific part.
Okay.
Let's go back to financing a
Okay.
little bit. What happens if a research group is directly funded continuously by an external source? Specifically, a foreign university.
Okay.
This is what happened to my research group, basically.
Yeah.
Right now, most of the money that's coming in is funded by a foreign university.
Yeah.
That means, as long as they are funding our lab,
You guys can keep afloat.
for the most part,
Yeah.
at least. Well, it's not enough per se, but at least it runs the bare minimum.
Okay.
They could always ask for more money, but when that happens, mangyayari is, kailangan i-prioritize yung mga ano nila, yung mga objectives ng
University.
ng benefactor.
Yeah. Which may or may not align with or ano ba?
It does.
It definitely does.
It
but,
definitely does. It's just that you need a specific set of people for these.
Okay.
That's what happened to people like. Actually, the I did not expect this kasi I only heard from Kevin.
The office junior mo?
Yeah, the office junior is still working there. Although at least thesis fees na siya.
Okay.
Nag-propose na siya eh. Ano na lang, final defense na hindi tayo. Likely, this sem na siguro mag-final defense yun.
Musta naman ano niya? Like, current standing niya sa buhay.
Just floating.
Just floating. Holding on. At the very least. Kasi, okay,
I almost want to just sometimes say casually that our lab has sold out to XXX university.
they are a external leg of
of that university, yeah. And right now it's more true than ever because biglang na-realize ko tuloy na parang Ben nung nasa ganitong conference kami last on 2018, we actually had to run their promotional videos. Dun sa
yes. You guys, like your former lab has become an advertising leg.
an advertising leg for
Yeah, I know the university.
Okay. I must have already told you then.
You don't have to mention it to me.
Okay.
I know it.
Okay. Sige. So, there is definitely a concern that at some point, the lab ceases, the research groups cease to be a function
The institute.
of the institute's research, or rather the institute's the
Institute's
research
mandate.
of the research of the students of the institute. Meaning, because ganito kasi yun, ano nangyayari is, in practice, wala kailangan mo ng thesis stop. Well, dati, before at least the entrant conditions changed, the applicant.
You did not need the thesis topic
When
immediately.
when we didn't need the thesis topic, what would usually happen is that, okay, may project sa ganito, and then you'll just attach to it, and then attach to the project, and then yun na yung magiging thesis mo. But now that people are expected to have a thesis topic from the get-go, that's going to add on top of yung papagawin sa kanila dun sa research group.
Yeah, true.
And most of the time, it's worse now because you don't have the option of just randomly folding your thesis into the project anymore. It's just you have to do both. And that's actually pretty stressful, especially because
It is.
you are now expected to write at least one paper. They're considering actually requiring an accepted manuscript para mag-graduate ka.
Holy shit!
Yes.
Even the NIP doesn't do that. We only require that for our PhDs.
For MS, to. For MS.
Yeah, for MS, you guys are your institute's requiring to do that.
Well, hopefully, I don't know. I don't know the status of that because it's been a while since I've last heard of this, but maybe di ko alam kung ginawa talaga nila yon. Hopefully hindi.
I mean, yes, it's going to be a boost, but it's also additional pressure. The pressure to publish compounds on you. Like, even for PhDs, it creeps on you in a sense. Like, well, but sometimes it is the fault of the PhD. Like, it is certainly going to be my fault if I don't publish by my third year. Because what am I doing with my life if that were the case? But yeah, would you say that lacking independence in research also compounds to the stresses of the student?
It's not a 1:1.
It's not a 1:1 thing, at least. Since, thing is kasi, in the NIP, no, not in the NIP. That's too general. Under Perry,
Under the gravity group.
no, not even gravity.
The theory.
Theory, like under Perry, you have two modes. Do you have any idea what you want to do with life, in your life? You don't? Okay, here's a paper, read it, and then let's see where it goes.
You just extend from that.
Extend from that. Like, we have a ton of we have some undergrads who come into theory just because they got in. And they have no idea what to do. So what Perry usually does is that, what are your interests in life? What are your interests? What are your interests in life? You don't have any? Okay. Do you have any field in mind? And then usually at that point, the student does have a field in mind, but they don't really know what that field entails. So Perry will throw a random paper at them and then tell them to report back next week with at least the bare minimum details of what that paper has. And that's if you don't have anything in mind. And this extends all the way up to your PhD. So if you're already a PhD student and you have no idea what to do, Perry will look at you with a very perplexed face.
How did you get this far?
Yeah, how did you... Well, in the case kasi, like, this friend of mine who's also attached to the ICTP project, the problem is that he worked on particle physics for such a long time. But pagdating ng PhD niya, there were no particle physicists left in the country. So, he was alone, and he had no idea how to move forward. So he shifted topics entirely. But the thing is that he has very little experience with the field. So Perry essentially rebuilt him from ground up. Like, that's impressive. In my case, Perry, I told Perry that I had an idea of what to do. So he threw a paper at me to introduce me to the topic, and then everything else is just me doing my shit. It's actually sort of detrimental to me at this point that I have this much degree of independence.
Well, it's for you specifically, at least.
Well, for one thing, I don't really talk to Perry that much unless it's involving things that don't relate to my research. Like, food. Tapos chismisan lang rin tungkol sa mga tao sa NIP. Wala eh. Mana talaga sa advisor. But yeah. I think another good indicator for mental health is for mental health in the academy is good rapport with your supervisor. Kasi in your case naman, are you on good terms with yours?
Even during the very difficult times.
Yeah.
Generally, yes.
So, well, kasi I don't actually know. How is the advisee dynamic in ISM?
I was, for all intents and purposes, the protege.
The protege.
The thing is, that didn't start until me. I was the first person to be ever treated like this. Because
But then the lab is fairly young eh. Diba?
the lab is fairly young. I was practically the first person who was able to keep up to such a degree that I can earn the title of being the protege.
Okay.
This is where people like me and Kevin and Harry come in, because we are all considered
The proteges of
Proteges.
your respective labs. Since sa amin, like, yeah, that's the professional relationship, but on more cordial terms.
on more cordial terms.
Not so much.
Not so much. The thing is, everything up until everything starting from the time that I was considered the advisee was specifically custom built for supposedly fast tracking my career.
For the other labs, ganun rin ba?
I can't say that. I can't say the same for others because wala akong experience. I don't know.
No. As in from info that you could gather, like from Harry or from Kevin. But I think from Harry, I can infer that it's not really here.
It's not really.
Yeah.
This is a thing that's specifically for me, for my research group.
No. But for Kevin naman, have you inferred anything? Okay, kasi from Harry, I can infer from my own observations. Eh.
Kasi Kevin, pinagbasa-basahan siya ng labs eh.
Okay.
He had worked for 2 different labs before eh.
No. I mean, just in terms of the...
Kasi Seele siya before, and then napunta siya sa lab ni Sir Jerry.
No, as in terms of the rapport between student and supervisor.
Kevin did not get along with Mr. Supervisor. At all. As in, totally ayaw ng advisor niya. Ayaw hindi na advisor niya, supervisor niya. Ayaw niya sa work ethic niya, period.
Okay. Then you jive better with Sir Jerry.
And then he's like better with Sir Jerry.
Since that's also a factor eh. Like, do you jive well with your supervisor?
Sa totoo lang, the thing is, I think I couldn't have jived better with anyone else except Dr. Cayetano.
Yeah.
Because we had to bring out the extreme high-strungness of each other in order for us to work.
But I also think that kind of resonance is detrimental
To both of us.
to both of you.
Because we just kept amplifying each other to such dangerous degrees.
Yeah. Like that high level of resonance is, yes, it can get you guys somewhere in productivity, but it's also going to backfire eventually.
It is.
And it did.
And it did. I burnt out hard.
Yeah. So, kasi I'm bringing this up because taking from lessons that we learn that kami in the NIP, we learned from OBAS and OBAM. Well, actually, I never read OBAM. I have assistants that read OBAM because they were required to. I wasn't because I was the one directly teaching the students. Pero the lessons that you essentially learn is that, okay, sure, there is burden in the student to take care of himself, but the supervisor needs to doubly do that as well. Kasi one of the greatest lessons that I learned from Perry is that you don't want to pressure the student. Yes, you want to pressure them enough so that they will actually move. Ako, I feel that pressure regardless whether Perry pressures me to do anything. So I do move occasionally. But usually, like during research meetings, where when he starts correcting a student continuously, he knows that the student is doing something wrong. Eh. And then he starts to show it on the board. And the student takes it really well. Like, it's. I don't think. I think it's rare that you have your advisor come up on board to correct you on the shit and you just kind of giggle it off because.
It takes a very mature personality, I think.
No. I don't think it's in the personality of the student. It's in the personality of the advisor. Eh. Kasi, for all intents and purposes, Perry is very chill as an advisor. I mean, sure, he will correct you continuously or mock you continuously if you don't know what you're doing. But
He will at least not make you feel like you're
yeah,
failure.
yeah, he will not make you feel like you're a failure. Granted, it's also because it's a recurring thing in theory that we kind of make fun of our own research. In a sense that, ano nga bang ginagawa natin dito? Anong research ginagawa? And like, tama nga ba ginagawa mo? Baka mali yan. And that's actually, like, as a theoretician, that's something we take to heart. Not the fact na we're probably wrong, but the fact that we might most certainly be wrong, but we're doing it anyway.
That's at least some freedom that you
Yeah.
have with your field, because here
Yeah. In your case kasi, because it's so close to
it has
real world models, it
Yeah.
has real world consequences. Eh.
it has immediate real world
Yeah.
consequences if we don't build up the theoretical model quite right.
Yeah.
If the premise is wrong, what's the point of the research?
Yeah. But at least you say in the case of you guys, it has to be hammered into you while you're a student, as early as then, that these are the core principles that have been observed in the field. These are the core
Or
observations.
if these are the ways that make sure that your research
Yeah, these are the
has-
sanity checks.
the sanity checks, or at least that your process, you're not getting this off of thin air.
Yeah, like you're not pulling it out of your ass suddenly. Like there is a solid basis for this. In theory kasi, like that's the beauty of theory at least. We have so much freedom. But compared to other fields, at least we have so much freedom, even though we know our own restrictions. We know the extent of our own limitations, but compared to most other fields, theoretical fields generally have, what if I do this? And then of course the limitation is that, okay, does it actually make sense?
Oh, well, in our case, here's an interesting thing. Me specifically, I have been assigned a niche that is completely different, not really completely different, but mostly different from what the other students in the research group had been doing up until that time.
Yeah.
Because I was always the person who was called on to test a completely new method.
Oh yeah, right. You were making new protocols eh.
With almost nothing to go on, and usually with improvised standards
Yeah.
that I actually have to compare to the actual let's say EPA standards.
Yeah.
So I have to make something na it's almost, I'd like to say, ghetto science. But here's the thing.
But you do have a physical basis.
Yes,
of
you do, basically.
of doing it.
What happens if you're doing science in a very depressed country in a general, or depressed area,
Yeah.
where you cannot expect to bring such complex complex machinery or equipment
Yeah.
or instruments at all.
So how do you MacGyver something?
So almost all of the things that I've encountered were basically MacGyvering this whole thing.
Yeah.
and in making it at least remotely useful for the kinds of experiments that we need to be doing in the
Yeah.
field. It's very heavy on street smarts in a way that traditional science is not expected to have. Because of the purely unique nature of doing research in a third world country as a third world researcher.
Yes.
That's a very unique frame of reference to be having.
Yes, definitely. It's very restrictive, but at the same time, it forces you to be creative.
But this unfortunately falls under the whole issue I have with the mentality of Filipinos are creative.
Why? Because we're not given the appropriate resources to begin with.
Yeah.
On the other hand, at least we know how to make do with shit. Think of it this way: is it going to be a sustainable local solution in the long run?
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
But is it always as reachable at this current state? Not always.
Not always. So it might be a good recommendation then to say that, okay, this works,
This doesn't.
but give us more resources so that we could make it work on.
So, it's a weird conundrum of having subpar resources, but the expectation is that you can, with these subpar resources, you can make something that works as well, or at least remotely as well, statistically significantly as well as the
traditional
the
methods.
traditional methods, which, from my experience, is harder than it is, harder than it seems.
But is it worth it?
If the Visor developed mini wind tunnel has anything to say about it, it works. At least there are parts that work.
That's still a step.
There are at least parts that work. Even if the entire system doesn't work the way we expected it to, we can always just keep iterating.
Now, which
over
is
and
more
over.
stressful, the MacGyvering or everything else?
The MacGyvering is not the stressful part. It's having to produce the data points from those. That is.
But is that inherently a bad thing?
You are always questioned about the integrity of your data.
It's not really a bad thing in that sense then.
I mean, it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be because you have developed a new method. So it doesn't actually. Well, that's not the thing that would deteriorate your mental state at
No,
most.
no, it's not.
It's not. It's gonna be stressful as fuck. But it still pales in comparison to like your general life outlook.
That this is basically my life.
Because of that, no, like those are short bursts. Those are scenes on the field that you can almost always recover from, given the appropriate resources. Thing is, kasi if you don't have the appropriate resources within the academe, the appropriate emotional support, the appropriate financial support, the stress that you develop over the course of just doing the research itself, which can already be stressful as it is, it will chip away on you. Like, as evidenced by your burnout.
My burnout was not instant.
Yeah, it wasn't instant.
It took 3 years.
Yeah, burnout is not instant. That's a thing that we need to point out. Like with regards to researchers, scientists, and mental health, people don't just ngingas kogon eh. Kasi the people who usually ngingas kogon, like me, we're just lazy eh. The people who truly burn out very slowly, and when they do, it's just a crash. It's a really intense crash, like your case.
I spent
Harry's
basically- I spent months in a state where I felt less than trash.
Yeah.
I felt like I did not have the capability to work in the scientific field at all.
Yeah. But what made you bounce? What made you bounce back? like lessons as a scientist, rather as a budding scientist back then.
People look forward to you.
At the very least.
At the very least, people are helped by this.
Yeah. And I think that is the takeaway for most scientists.
That at least I actually got to talk to someone who found some use out of the work that we did.
Yeah. At least you saw one barangay that
Several.
several barangays that somehow it made.
One entire city naman, or at least the ones that we actually went to personally nakita ko, but all of them. All of the ones in that particular LGU. Well, LGUs kasi dalawa at least.
Yeah. So I think that's also a takeaway. Like
I knew from the start that this was gonna pass. Or at least I had an outlook at least that it's gonna get done. My ability as a scientist didn't actually fade away. It's just that I just had too much on my plate. It's an understanding. It requires a lot of emotional support. It requires
Yeah.
a lot of people telling you that no, you don't suck.
yeah.
You're not the garbage that you claim you are. You have to have that strong emotional support behind you.
Yeah, I think that's something that most budding scientists, especially in really stressful environments, need to have.
Like,
Rather,
the imposter syndrome.
it's not something that they need to have that's expected for them na sila yung maghahanap eh. But it should be provided to them, more or less provided to them na rin eh. Na,
Especially for people with my personality, the imposter syndrome is like very palpable.
yeah, definitely.
Especially the more that you're experienced, the more you constantly feel, the more you're constantly exposed to the idea that you underperform all the time, that you're not doing the work as hard as you can, even though you physically are already.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome is a real thing that really most people, no, not most people, most academicians would feel, especially young ones. Like for me, I can manage to mask it in a veneer of wonder. But while I was in Singapore, in a dark matter workshop, it's really just, oh shit, this guy's Frank of the of the galactic simulations. This guy's Wilczek. These are all big names in dark matter cosmology and particle physics. What am I doing with these people?
For me, that conference experience wasn't so much that it was big names. It was more, I was at AOGS in Singapore. Singapore didn't.
Yeah.
See, it's another Singapore conference, and I was presenting. I was presenting something with regard to biomass burning because I had a poster session.
Yeah.
But when I'm actually in the conferences, when I'm sitting down and watching the people present, I'm like, why did I not get to this level? I'm doing peanuts compared to these people.
Or rather, you think you're doing peanuts compared to these people. It's always like that eh. Like I keep on telling, like my colleagues in physics keep on telling me, i-publish mo na yung shit mo. I'm like, my shit is publishable? I don't think this is publishable.
I mean,
You're MS.
yeah.
I don't think I can publish that shit. Feels too basic for me.
The awakening, sorry, no. The turning point for that kind of mentality, the moment where that changed for me was when I realized that I was in a unique position to have published a paper before my thesis because of the segmented nature of my thesis.
Yeah.
And I just published the first part first while we're waiting for the results of this and this.
Yeah.
I realized that by the time that this manuscript was going to get fully accepted the manuscript, it was still awaiting another revision cycle to get it actually published.
Yeah.
And then the realization hit me. By the time I finish this, this will have been obsolete. By my own hand, with my own research that I just done right now,
Yeah.
and yet that is still publishable, that's still valid. And I realized that that's when it clicked to me that it just needed to be done. Rather than it being perfect.
Yeah. Although, personally, my own concerns in my research is that, for me, it was more of, I think someone already did this.
That's actually a more problem.
Oh.
That is a more tangible problem for your field.
Yeah. Because of the fast pace of ano yun.
Because in my case, it was like, of course, no one's gonna think of doing this. It's a complete map. It's a complete. Wait, why did I even think of doing this in the first place? Because I can. Because I kind of have to.
Kasi one of my problems with regards to my research is I always have to ask myself 2 points. First, has someone done this? And two, if someone hasn't done this, then what's the point of doing it? I can't. Usually, if I manage to answer the first one, I can't answer the second one because it feels a bit opaque to me, in a sense. Which is why I'm trying really hard this time in the PhD, get something done, and to publish it. Like, it doesn't have to be super fucking original. It just needs to make sense.
It needs to make sense. It needs to have its place.
It needs to have its place. I think I've stumbled on something that might be frontier, but I'll have to ask Perry about it. Probably Ian.
Si Ian siguro.
Ian and Perry, simultaneously.
Simultaneous. Both of them.
I need to ask both of them because I might need to have Ian as my co-advisor for this.
For the paper.
For my
Dissertation.
Kung itutuloy ko sa NIP yung lahat yung research ko. Like, if I don't end up in some other university abroad. But yeah, it's really, like, we were supposed to talk about mental health actually. Pero
Nga eh.
we got into this kind of tangent, which I don't really mind.
I mean, it's pretty difficult to talk about because our own motivations for wanting to talk about the mental health thing is because we just really needed to get these off of our chests in some way.
Yeah.
Especially me,
Especially you.
because the atmosphere at ISM completely changed under my nose since I was gone. When I was in the process of getting out.
Yeah. But I do think that we did make a fairly good point. Since in conclusion, people generally need to stop treating scientists as if they're ivory tower, closed room, lone magicians, performing research for their own sake.
Or at least for the client's sake.
For their client's sake. No need for any support. I can do this, bruha. No. Scientists are regular people as well. And especially with their line of work. Just like any line of work actually that involves high stress, high mental demand. You're gonna need the same levels of emotional support that most people do. Even if most people don't really understand what they're doing most of the time. Kaya nga it's good to have good colleague rapport. That's one. Good supervisor rapport. That's two. That's why Perry almost always like, okay, he's bored. Tara kain. Saan? Town center? Wag muna town center. Mini stop? Mini stop.
And then, in contrast to me being explicitly told that you did not come to this lab to make friends.
Yeah. Di ba? It's a stark contrast eh. And I generally think that that's why, I would say mentally healthy, comparatively healthy yung mental state ng mga tao sa Fury at least. In the other labs kasi like, people tend to gravitate to labs based on their personality combined with their interests. People who have no initial research interests and are generally not really inclined to socialize will gravitate towards theory. Sometimes sand. And then people who
Who are the types of people who will go to sand anyway?
Essentially like theory, but they probably need a bit more. Like sand is very hands-on with its support relations. Theory is more okay. You have a problem, approach us. Ikaw bahala. In sand, they have a better support group. They have a better support network. But sand's research isn't really my thing, so
Is that your niche?
it's not my niche. I'm really more of a theoretical modeling.
And I think, hindi ko sure kung nasabi ko na siya ng story na to.
But
Had I not changed my thesis topic, I would have worked in the same lab as Harry.
ooh,
So, okay, itong story nun. My original thesis topic was about river channels.
okay,
What I wanted to do was, since this was a thing that I did in my undergrad, and decided to, okay, maybe I have the actual resources to do this now in a grad school setting with actual research equipment. And since all of my job batchmates, even all, but a lot of my job batchmates went to work for the Phil LiDAR project, Dream.
yeah,
And that gave me an idea to, okay, maybe I should try and look for what happens if can we have a comparison with using historical data of river and stream channels using LiDAR for a certain river. Because is solid waste impaction actually a thing? Is it making the river channels shallow? Is it increasing the hazard of flooding? Ganun.
impaction downstream.
Is it making, the idea is that it's making the river channels shallower.
Yeah,
But the thing is, there was one, no historical data, and two, even if there were, it's not part of the yung study area ko was not part of the bounds. Na meron na data sila. So I quickly had to scrap that out.
okay,
Had I continued to work on something to that line, I would have actually worked at Pips
with all of the baggage that comes with
with
it,
all of the baggage that comes with it.
unfortunately.
And to think that I did not see a therapist until I started working in my lab.
What more if you work in Pearson?
It took several, well, that was like 2017 pa ata, yun 2017.
Yeah,
And the thing is, that was precipitated by a series of very marked breakdowns.
yeah. Pero nga, like, I guess we can safely conclude that, okay, you out there, budding scientist, if you are listening to this, why? But
But one for one, why? How did you come across this in the first place?
how do you come across this? How do you come across this talk in the first place? But second of all, I want to emphasize on the following with regards to scientists in public health.
And mental health.
Mental health, not public health. Mental health. The environment that you end up in matters, and sometimes you first need to check out if that environment will jive with you or not. Sometimes though you have no choice. Depends on the field. So it's a really complicated issue. The thing that you have in control is whether or not you're gonna enter it in the first place. Or if you have a choice to enter in it, well, that's another thing in entirety. But there are a ton of systematic issues, funding, environment, work culture, etc., that compound with how mental health in scientists is going to play out. So it's all these factors need to be taken into consideration, and I do hope that all labs, all institutes within at least the UP College of Science knows that mental health is affecting the productivity of their institutes as well. Like UPCS is slowly awakening to this at least. The NIP has, definitely.
And I think considering the new the just appointed new dean, I think
Yeah, and like Gani also knows this. So
Kevin has been making him know.
yeah, Kevin has been making him know. Kevin is pushing a lot of stuff in
But to be
ISM.
fair naman kasi, ano siya eh, council na siya eh.
Yeah. Despite Kevin's own stress levels shooting up with regards to his attempts.
Impending defense.
Yeah, his impending defense and all the responsibilities he has as counsel.
And SMs.
Yeah, and SMs. So I do hope that little by little there's a better culture of mental health in the sciences in general. So with that, I think we can close the science section
Of whatever this is.
of whatever this is. Now
We will be taking another break, I guess.
we'll be taking a 5-minute break so that my vocal cords can recover from this pain.
Like, you have been drinking like water continuously for this entire time. Actually, drink water. That's another thing that we can take away from this team. Drink water, just hydrate.
Stay hydrated, Marco Sanchez.
Marco Sanchez.
Hey guys, I just thought of a cool drinking game. The rules are simple. 1. Drink at least 8 glasses of water a day. And that's it. Try it guys, it's fun.